Hi, Misha here, and recently we looked at Mandalorian armor, weapons, different Black Series figures, toys, whatever you'd like to call them. And in that video we did look at the Jango Fett and the Boba Fett from Empire Strikes Back. But I wanted to focus more on the Boba Fett's, the Boba Fett's, looking at the Return of the Jedi, as well as examples from Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, kind of showing the evolution of this most famous of galactic bounty hunters. Why not? To begin briefly, the Jango again, because in the beginning, Boba Fett, his clone slash son, looked like him. He adopted the armor, including the color and the Westar 34 kind of cowboy style long-barreled blasters. I took off the Z6 jetpack and put on the J12 or JT12 just because I kind of like the look of it better. This was Boba Fett's original look very early on in his bounty hunting service. Another thing too, the helmet comes off this particular example, giving that Temuera Morrison head, which would be the same for Boba Fett as well. But they were different people. They had different ways. They grew up in different times and under different situations. As I said in the last video, I still consider the Fetts to be Mandalorians. They might be disowned or dishonored under the code Mandalorians, but at one time Jango Fett was technically the Mandalore. So, yeah. But he definitely was more into close range, fast-paced, high-octane fighting, bounty hunting during the Republic era, and going up against Jedis and others. Luckily, he did have Beskar armor that was lightsaber resistant. I'm not going to say proof, but resistant. And did an even better job at deflecting blaster bolts. But of course he would die in 22 BBY at the beginning of the Clone Wars, leaving his 10-year-old son alone to be raised by other bounty hunters and, of all people, somewhat Jabba the Hutt. An interesting teen years, I'll give him that. So let's move on to the real Boba Fett. And again, the Empire Strikes Back one we saw in the last video. Wanting to kind of distinguish himself and be his own man, Boba Fett would retool, repaint, and refit the armor, kind of going to a green scheme. And eventually would actually replace the helmet. There's a different style of dent on the original helmet versus the Boba Fett helmet. Now this particular figure does not have a removable helmet, and it actually doesn't rotate, it just moves up and down. And it does have a cape, or half cape, which is something that Jango Fett didn't have. And it has the J6 jetpack. Don't believe these rotate on this one either. Nope, and the rocket doesn't come out. It's a pretty much fixed backpack. But it is painted to match, and he does have his K11 disintegrator pistol. Big old blocky, ugly pistol. It's actually outlawed by the Empire. And he has his EE3 blaster carbine. It's interesting, whereas Jango Fett was more of a close range, rapid fire, Boba Fett preferred more medium, even long range shots, more precision. He's got a scope on it. You've got kind of blocks and everything around the California thumbhole stock. And this was actually, the prop from Empire Strikes Back was actually made from a British Webley and Scott Mark I flare gun, signal gun, with the scope added and some other stuff added to the barrel. That's what's kind of neat, is a lot of the ordnance was actually built from real world stuff. And a lot of it was British, because the early Star Wars films were filmed primarily in the UK. And at this, he has more of the bounty hunter look, including the Wookiee pelt kind of braid on his right here. And since Boba Fett was born in 32 BBY, by the time of Empire Strikes Back, he was 35. By the time of Return of the Jedi, he would have been 36. And he was pretty much the most credible bounty hunter in the galaxy. But there's quite a few stories and whatnot of him from the Clone Wars period, even though he's 11, 12 years old at the time. It's interesting. It's also interesting, even at that time, even as a kid, even though he's a ruthless bounty hunter, he has a code. He has some ethics. He's not just a disgusting person. Also, I'll note that he has the spiky boots, whereas Jango Fett didn't, and they are magnetic. I talked more about the Mandalorian outfit and armor before. This one is a little bit lightened up at the legs, as I said last time, compared to before. It's a little more weathered, a little more battle-worn, a little more customized. He still has the van braces with all kinds of gadgets and widgets in there. And between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he continued to do various jobs. According to both legends and canon, he didn't hurry up and go to Jabba's and nearly lost Han Solo several times. That's really stupid, and I don't like that. That's dumb. I'm not even going to blame Disney for that, because even in Legends canon, he did that. It's like, no, I think if I've got a really expensive prize, I'd go straight to Tatooine. I know it's kind of a bland place, but in the Star Wars universe, ships travel really fast. It would have only been a few hours to get there, maybe a day. Do it, get it done. Otherwise, you're being a big target. But with that, since we've already looked at these two, let's move on to the first new figure of this video. This is the Return of Jedi, Boba Fett, and it was sold as a deluxe figure. For one thing, they redid the body to give it better articulation, more modern features, as you were. And for another, Boba Fett really did appear different in Return of the Jedi vis-a-vis Empire Strikes Back. Again, he was out bounty hunting, adventuring for a year, a little more, and he can customize his armor. When we meet him in the film, he's just hanging out at Jabba's, doing Jabba things. One interesting thing, this figure does not have the holster or the disintegrator pistol. And I don't think he had it in Return of the Jedi either. He does have his EE3, but it too has been modified a bit. The real world explanation, they took the prop and they upgraded it a bit to make it look a little better. In universe, though, it has a thicker barrel with more of a shroud or jacket around it to look as a, act as a foregrip. They also moved and kind of flipped around the optic, so presumably we could say it has a new scope. In reality, it's still the same Webley and Scott Mark I flare gun. They just made it a little more detailed since it was going to be used more in the film instead of Empire Strikes Back. Just a few little things. So it's an upgraded, more customized version, kind of like an AR-15. If you look at people who own those, every year it seems like the look of the AR changes. And like I said, this was a deluxe figure, and one of the first deluxe things it had. It's pretty neat, honestly. It didn't cost really any more than a standard figure when I picked it up, like $25. It came with a second EE3. Not really sure if this was worth it, but it can be split in two to replicate when Skywalker cuts it with a lightsaber. It's a neat concept, and definitely having him holding half of it in his hand. I think they would have been okay if they just gave you like half of an E3 to hold, having both halves. But again, it's nice to have two, I guess. They do peg together very tight. There's still like that little damage in the middle, but I guess you could say that Kylo Ren welded it back together for him. Another feature that's of dubious note, it came with this cable and grapply thing. This would have been fired out of his right wrist, and he used it to wrap up Luke for a minute. But little did he know that Luke was already into bondage and knew how to get out of one of these really easy. Hey, considering it looked like Luke might be into incest, luckily he wasn't. Bondage is the least of his thing. But he did wear all black and leather a lot, so, you know, hey. This is it's one of those better in concept than reality things. It doesn't stick onto him very well. And comes off. And I got my gun there, so I can't even put it on. But there's no real place to put it. It's a harmless little thing. 2 small pieces of plastic and a piece of string or small rope. So I'm sure it didn't add much to the value. But it's something. And some might find it of use. Why not? And our next little accessory that a lot of people really like with various figures, a so-called flame effect for his, what is it, XZ or ZX flame thrower on his band brace there. Since I can't see it, and it's just more if I can feel it, to me it's not that impressive, but maybe if you're just looking at it, it looks kind of like fire. I can understand the appeal. Certainly for a kid, it would have been neat. And in universe, the reason that so many Mandalorian armor pieces and suits have flamethrowers, as I said in the other video, they were originally made to combat the Jedi. And, well, a lightsaber can deflect a blaster, maybe even a projectile. It can't really deflect flame. So, thinking on it, yeah, a flamethrower is a pretty good thing to go against a Jedi. And also just a good tool. In various things, Fett has used this to kind of kill it with fire, cleanse things. Also, this is how he got out of the Sarlacc. In pretty much both Legends and canon, he used a flame to burn a hole in the side of the Sarlacc and get out. So, yeah, good on him. He also has a miniature blaster, actually 2-barrel blaster in the wrist. He has small missiles, including some MM9s. And he has other projectiles on the legs there, kind of around the knees. Lots of stuff in the armor. But then again, they live in these suits. So, yeah. As I joked in the first one, they must use their tongues to control things, since it's all through the helmet more than keypads and stuff. And there was an old legend story, I think it was Tales of the Bounty Hunters, back in the late 80s, early 90s, where someone buys him a drink at Jabba's palace to try to get him to take his helmet off to drink it and reveal his face. Because before Attack of the Clones, Boba Fett's face was a big mystery. But when he got the drink served to him, a straw popped out. And he did that. So even back then, there were kind of little jokes and people thinking about, well, how does he eat and drink with the helmet on? even back then it was kind of revealed that he didn't take it off much. But it is said that he would take it off late at night to talk with Jabba. He wouldn't set his blaster down because, trust always goes so far. But interestingly, there was a bizarre friendship and respect between Boba Fett and Jabba. But our features don't end with his hands and weapons. We've got this jetpack. Note, too, that he comes with a rubber cape instead of a cloth, a soft goods. There's pros and cons to both. I think overall, I kind of like the rubber. More patterned. But the soft one's neat, too. Now, this pack will probably look the same to you versus what was on the Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett. And it is basically the same, but we have some new features. For one, these do rotate the nozzles. That one's a little stiff, this one's a little looser. Neat though, at the angle. And our missile pops off. That gets into the whole rocket-firing Boba Fett scandal of 1978-79, when that was supposed to be a feature spring-loaded rocket. That would have been one of the earliest spring-loaded rocket-firing toys, but of course they had to cancel it, safety and all that, because of Starbuck. Well, sort of. So it's actually Bo-Katan's fault even then. So this doesn't launch, but it does plug in. That's neat, so you can display him with or without his anti-vehicle rocket fired. And we have one more feature. I'm sure you've guessed it by now, but let's look at it real quick. I'm talking, of course, about the flame effects for his jetpack. As has been sung about in song, and it's one of the most famous things known about Boba Fett. He's got a jetpack. And, yeah, not just flame effects for the flamethrower, but we have these they can plug in. And with the rotating nozzles, and if you use a flight stand of some type, there's actually some posing possibilities. And whereas in Empire Strikes Back, we don't really see the jetpack in use, we do see it used, much to Fett's chagrin in Return of the Jedi. So it's a fitting feature to have on this relatively deluxe commemorative feature for Return of the Jedi. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that in some ways Return of the Jedi is my favorite. I know that's sacrilege, but it was the right age for me. And Jabba's palace was neat. The fight with Vader was neat. And I don't know, just really enjoyed it. Lando got some cool things to do. But that's our Boba Fett from the original trilogy. He would be shot into the Sarlacc pit with his jetpack malfunctioning because it was hit with a stick or something. And it was kind of said that he died there, but absolutely nowhere in the expanded universe, nowhere in any canon was he really dead in the Sarlacc. No one really... Oop, I'm pointing the wrong way. Sorry. No one really thought that. George Lucas later would say he just didn't really realize how popular this dude was. But it wasn't very long at all until books and comics revived him. And really the modern canon didn't change the story an awful lot. But of course there would be some changes. So with that, let's progress from the original trilogy into the modern era. Here we have the first figure from the Mandalorian / Boba Fett lineup. I think it's technically in the Mandalorian line. This is called Boba Fett Tython. And I picked this one up. At first I wasn't going to because it's obviously not him in an armor. But it was so inexpensive, I found it for like $15. So why not? Then I got it, and I actually really like it. Now, in both Legends and canon, he gets out of the Sarlacc by flame. In Legends, it was his jetpack. He actually made it explode and used that to make a hole and get out. In canon, he actually used his flamethrower to kind of cut a hole. I actually like the Legends, actually the canon, version better. It's more straightforward. And in both instances, he basically stumbles out, collapses on the Tatooine desert, or Tatooine, as Luke says at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and is passing out, and then he's basically mugged, robbed, jacked by Jawas. And the irony of the most powerful bounty hunter being assaulted by Jawas is not lost on anyone. So from there, things get a little different. Legends is pretty convoluted. They take him on a sandcrawler because they think he's a droid, and then the sandcrawler gets attacked by Tusken Raiders, and then malfunctions, heading back to the Sarlacc. He gets out. It's a little, and then Dengar steps in and rescues him. Again, it's kind of back and forth convoluted. I kind of like the more simplistic version in canon, where the Jawas just take all of his gear, leave him for dead in the desert, and then from there he ends up in a Tusken tribe, first as a prisoner. But again, I'm overly simplifying, but anyway, you know what I mean. And then he earns his way. His story, I like it. It's very definitely elements of Dune, which is one of my favorite books, and of all things, Dances with Wolves, if you think about it. You know, whereas the Tuskens are kind of stand-in for Native Americans. But also him, like, earning his place is like with Paul and the Fremen, especially the brutality of the Tuskens at first. So he doesn't have his armor, doesn't really have anything. So he's in very much Tusken robes here. And there's an outer cloth cape with hood. And then there's an inner rubber robe that is semi-flexible. And the hood, of course, does come back, giving us some more Morrison head. You can actually fold it back very well, but I'm doing it ugly right now because I plan on putting it back. I like it with him over. Of course, he's pretty battered and scarred, first from the Sarlacc, because, you know, large-scale digestive juices not good for a body. It does not do a body good. And then, of course, the Tuskens continually beat and abused him for a while. That is, until he took a trip with a little magic lizard crawling up his nose. I swear, if Jim Morrison were still alive, I would say he wrote that whole scene. But that's actually where he went tripping balls into the desert, as you're to do. You ever notice, like, deserts kind of end up doing that because it's the desert? He got a branch from a tree, and that's how he made this gaffy stick here. It's got wood with a metal spike on the end, and this metal spike is strong enough it can pierce stormtrooper armor, and that's kind of the weapon of a Tusken. And this one here comes with a string, a sling, if you will, a rope, which is really cool. And then we have his other weapon on the back, which is basically an old Turkish Ottoman Empire musket, for lack of a better word. In reality, the prop. In Star Wars universe, it's a slug thrower or a cycler rifle, so it shoots projectiles. And these are kind of cobbled together, reworked, rebuilt by Tuskens. Again, very a la Native American style. It's interesting if you go to museums and look at guns that Native Americans used and some of the stuff they did with them. I remember seeing one museum where they used telegraph wire that they had stolen, well, from a telegraph line, and they put it back together, kind of a busted up old Springfield. Might have even been an Enfield, I can't remember now. I digress. Anyway, Tusken rifle, and even though it's an older type gun, it is very long range with a scope and powerful, and Boba Fett and Migs Mayfield, for that matter, uses it to great success. So, and it has a sling with it too, although its sling is made from a soft rubber, and it's removable. In fact, both straps are removable. That's really cool. And if that's not enough weaponry for you, you pull back his robes, there's a holster made of a hide with a new blaster pistol. That's his most modern weapon, and he will actually continue to carry that throughout Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. So yeah, this one figure has 2 large weapons and 1 smaller one with holster, and they all have storage, slings and holster. And he's got a hood, and he's got a scarred up Tamora Morrison older face. I do think it's great they got the actual original actor from 2002 to come back and fill this role. That's just icing on the cake. I have to give them credit. Getting Katie Sackhoff, getting several people back, even sort of getting Mark Hamill back. Well, if you've seen, you know what I mean, kind of back. But yeah, the alumni, you can't help but enjoy it. I know it's fan servicey, and I don't care. But I ended up, again, only buying this one because it was inexpensive, and I thought, why not? And it's actually become one of my favorites because it's from an interesting stage in his journey in life, which, you know, you watch the show to get on about, but hitting him kind of teaming up with Shand and reclaiming his armor and kind of adapting his code to become maybe more Mandalorian than before. And that gets us to our final figure tonight. Actually, I just picked this one up, and that's why I decided to do the video now. Got it about a week ago, and I found that on sale. This too is considered a deluxe edition, but again, it's only about $25-30 if you find it. It's called Boba Fett Throne Room, as in Jabba's palace throne room, where he goes in and, let's say, offers bib Fortuna an early retirement and takes over. So we see it in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett a little bit. And it's kind of a take on the previous one, but now with him having regained his armor. And there is a holster on the side here, just on the last one. I took the blaster out because this one comes out a little easier. Here's the new Boba Fett blaster. I don't know the name of it, but I can tell you it's the prop is made from a Mark V signal or flare gun. So it's kind of in keeping with his EE3. And we do see him using it. He seems to be rather partial to it. And again, it can be stowed on the side of the figure. Like so. This holster is neat. It has kind of a faux leather patterning and even a little bit of like stitching. And it looks like it's made for a slightly different gun. It's a little longer. I mean, in reality, in our world, it's made for this toy, but you know, it looks like in universe it was a repurposed holster for something else. And then he has his EE3, very similar to the one that was destroyed in Return of the Jedi. But if you look at the sculpt here, it has more patterning, more ribbing around the barrel grip. So it is slightly different, which makes sense because his original one was already a custom gun, and it was chopped up by Luke. How rude. I wonder if Luke bought him anyone that later. But it is a different mold from the other one. So that's neat. We don't actually see him shooting this in Book of Boba Fett, but we do see him with it, so take that as you will. Those are his 2 guns that he comes with here, because he has kind of the same legs from the Tython Boba Fett. There's not much, there's a lot of pivot and rotation both down here and up here, but not much movement here. A little bit of a skirt or comma here. No outer robe. We have essentially the same jetpack. These do still rotate. This missile does pop off. but it does not come with the blast effects. To be fair, we don't actually see him using the jetpack or flamethrower in Book of Boba Fett, so I guess technically that would be inaccurate. But what we do see with this, it's a little different. We have a removable helmet. And again, it's that battered and bruised Tamora Morrison head, but since he's had some back-to-baths, maybe it's not quite as bad. He's had a little bit of R&R. Another neat thing, too, you know, his father was de-necked by Mace. Very rude. And you see with the armor now that they've added additional neck plating, kind of filling in a soft spot in the armor, and it matches up with the helmet very well, actually. I really like that, because even when he's looking up, it doesn't let you see his chin. It's kind of some of the problems with the armor, but or the helmets. But it should be the same helmet, because it has the same small dent. We have the same chest plate, but the legs are different. We don't have the same boots. And seems like he's not wearing all of his arm stuff. Doesn't have quite as many hoses. But who knows what equipment was lost or damaged or just outdated and he replaced. So it's not quite as impressive as the deluxe figure as the Return of the Jedi, but I think it's an interesting thing. And again, we still get a holster with a sidearm, we get a blaster, we get the same basic jetpack, and we get a removable helmet, and we get kind of this skirt in the bottom. Still not a bad deal if you can find it for $25-30. This is kind of the end of his little journey, at least so far, where he's taking over where Jabba left off, establishing his own empire, and also doing it with a certain code, doing it with some morality in his own way. Plus, he's got a new pet baby Rancor. We get a new kitten this year. Boba Fett got a Rancor. And all I want's a Maine Coon. But yeah, kind of wraps up his little journey. And there we have it. You know, some might argue that certain Star Wars characters have been diminished with time. Some just like the original trilogy and don't like the prequels. Some like the original trilogy and the prequels, but not the Disney. Other people like all of it. And maybe some characters haven't aged well. But I actually think overall, Boba Fett has benefited more from time than less. Because if you read the expanded universe from the 80s and early 90s, it gets a little wild with him. And while him being a clone and all that took a little getting used to back in 2002, 20 years ago, I think we're adjusted now. We've had time. And I actually do like where they've taken him in modern times for the most part. Could just be that I also like the actor and the way it's acted, so go from there. And as far as these figures, it's hard to argue that the Return of the Jedi isn't the best. If you're only going to get one, this is the definitive Boba Fett. It comes with the most, and it's kind of the midpoint of his career. You know, he at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, he's at a high point in his career before suffering a low and then a rebound. But, you know, each one kind of has something to recommend it, if we're being honest. For example, I really like this Jango Fett. We could also play it off as a very early Boba Fett for being a relatively clean, armored up Mandalorian, fully armored on the legs. It does have the newer head. Now, the original release of this came with the other jetpack, or actually came with this one, the JT-12, but this one actually came with the Z6, so I did that. That's me. It's neat for being kind of the start of the journey, if you look at them as nearly the same person. And between these two, at first you might want to say the Return of the Jedi is better, end of story. But I still have a soft spot for The Empire Strikes Back. It's most like the old Kenner toy we had when I was a kid. And if I didn't have one, friends might have done. What am I picking up? Yeah, there it is. And, you know, the more simple package isn't bad without all the blast effects and stuff. We've got the original EE3 style. And I do like that he has the big old blocky, ugly, but effective disintegrator pistol on his hip. I do like that. And the soft cape is nice too. Probably the biggest downfall of this one's the backpack. I don't mind it missing the flame effects, but the fact that the missile is not removable and the nozzles don't turn, at least I don't think they do. They sure don't feel like they want to. Like I said, this one kind of goes all out. We've already talked about it. But it's a little more beat up, a little more aged. And no pistol. But I do like the EE3 from Return of the Jedi a bit more. And like I said, the Tython one here, the Sand People, Boba Fett, he would not be my choice if you only wanted one, because it's not the iconic Boba Fett. But in and of itself, it's a really neat figure. It's kind of a cross between old Obi-Wan and a Sand Person. Sand People? And I love the fact that he comes with 3 weapons and they all can hang on his body. He's got a cloak, his hands are still free, and that beat up face. That's great. It's kind of a unexpected pleasure. And I will say the same thing for this one over here. It's a more regal, older, more weathered and grizzled Boba, but also more seasoned. This is him being less of a brute force muscle man and more of a tactician, more of a leader. And the way he's kind of customized his armor further, it seems like every time we see him in armor, it's always a little change. This is kind of his thing. It's a Mandalorian thing. And actually, I believe this helmet will actually fit on this one too. Let's see. Yeah, fits perfectly. I figured it would because it's the same basic head. You can even move the rangefinder forward and put our little hood up, maybe. There's a look for you. Yeah. I don't mind moving stuff around, kind of like I did with the jetpack on Jango here. It's all this plugging in. Besides, he's not a member of the tribe. He's not part of Din Djarin's Children of the Watch. He can take his helmet off. He can put his feet up in Jabba's palace, right? But yeah, that's good old Boba Fett. What an interesting story this character's had in universe and out. From very much a secondary character. Even one time he was even supposed to be a Imperial Super Commando, Super Stormtrooper. And then he evolved into this, a whole backstory. And something that's going nearly 25 years after he was introduced in 1978. And we haven't even gotten to Slave 1, his ship. We can do that very soon. We can also talk about other bounty hunters if you like. IG-88, Dingar, Zuckuss, Forlom, the whole crew. But not Greedo, because Greedo's lame. Okay, not really, but yeah. Just having fun, guys, on this weekend. Hope everyone's doing well. And I hope the weather turns cool soon, too. It's been very hot. But let me know what you think. And if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.